May I love myself just as I am. May my happiness continue to grow. May I love and be loved. Meditation was introduced in my life at an early age, and not like officially. It was an experience I had with my abuelita, with my grandma. And I was like 11, and I was sitting outside, and I experienced something really profound. It was a trip, like that was like the first time I really experienced that, what people talk about, I guess, enlightenment, where I just was one with everything. I was one with my grandma. Felt one with myself. Yeah, I think that was the first time I experienced meditation.
Meditation can actually refer to many different things. It can refer to mindfulness. It can refer to concentration. Meditation is common across both Eastern and Western spiritual traditions. It's increasing our capacity to be aware of what our experience is.
So sex, drugs, and rock and roll, those were my addictions. And I mixed them all. And, you know, as being a queer man, I came out on the streets of Hollywood, and, you know, right off of Santa Monica Boulevard, and with all the prostitutes and the drugs that went along with that lifestyle. And so that to me was like being gay, was going to bars and drinking, you know, and then that's what all the other gay folks were doing. And so I knew I was gay, I knew I was queer, so I knew that, okay, this is what I thought this is what I got to do, you know, to fit in.
I grew up in a very typical sort of middle class suburb outside of Philadelphia, and even during that time, I knew that I was a gay boy, even though I didn't have those words. By my early 30s, I was, even though I was to the world functioning, I was deeply unhappy inside, not knowing where to go. So, you know, one of my therapists actually said, you know, you need to find a way to decrease your stress. And so I started meditating.
It's particularly accessible for those of us that identify, you know, in the queer community or as people of color. We're able to come here on certain nights where we know we'll have the safety to express those tender places in our hearts and not be met with judgment, criticism, or be held apart.
The places I practiced were, again, like my suburban upbringing, pretty upper middle class and white. And so I didn't feel that I fit in or belonged, and didn't know whether this tradition was meant for a person like me, which is ironic considering my parents came from Asia, and this is an Asian tradition. It became clear that identity is such a door into spiritual practice. And so that was one of my interests, along with some fellow Dharma friends, to create something like EBMC, East Bay Meditation Center, that is fully accessible to all those diverse identities that not just reside in our communities, but also reside in ourselves.
I hear from a lot of people that, like, when they meditate, they feel very relaxed. And when I first meditated, I was very frustrated because, like, I would try to concentrate and I would try to focus on my breath, and I couldn't. Like, you know, I would try to focus, and then my thoughts would drift out somewhere. You know, I would have like some Lady Gaga like song in my head, and I thought like, you know, this isn't working. Like, am I doing something wrong?
In this contemporary vernacular, Sangha means community. It is one of the three refuges. The possibility of awakening, the refuge of the Buddha, is the first refuge. The path towards that freedom is the Dharma, which is the second refuge. And it's so interesting that in this particular wisdom tradition, community is actually the third pillar of the spiritual teachings, that you can't actually thrive in your spiritual life without the experience of community. That means, you know, the relationships beyond just ourselves.
I grew up with my Latino side of the family, and so when I came out at the age of 26, to my mom, it was a trip. You know, there's so many layers to it. It's integrated in a way, it's suppressed, right? It's suppressed, and as an individual, we have to repress it, and we integrate into the majority culture, which is heterosexism, and we go have babies, and we don't stray so much from that conditioning, right, that role.
Those messages that you grew up with, that you're not okay because of where you're from, because of how you look, your skin color, or who you love, that were so persistent, sort of a daily, it's traumatizing to grow up and not have a reflective image of who you are.
And I think that's one of the reasons why I feel very comfortable in that place, because it's not like a space that's like homogenized, right? It's a space that like I feel that like when I go in there, I don't stick out like a sore thumb, right? And so I feel very much just kind of like, I don't feel invisible, but I feel like comfortable in that space.
And the first is, where do you hold on? Okay? Where do you resist the change in your life? Where is it in your life that you wish things to be constant and unchanging? Question 2 is, how does that make you feel? And then the third question, really, which is what we really want to explore, is how do you use your practice to help you work with that desire to hold on?
I hit all these bottoms, right? So I hit these points where I was like, where the fuck am I? Who the fuck did I just have sex with? Unprotected sex with? Under the influence of all these drugs, you know? Sex being one of the drugs. And it just got to a point where, you know, I just like, it was my rock bottom, and I won't go into the story. It's an awful story. But I'm grateful. I'm so grateful that I got to that point without having any permanent damage, you know, where I was like, okay, I cannot give any more of myself to these addictions, to these addictive behaviors. And so, yeah. And in that moment of, I was in the ER, in that moment of sitting in the ER, it was like, that was meditative. That was like, no more. I'm not gonna give myself spiritually, physically, emotionally. I'm not gonna give myself. I'm not that person anymore. You know, I'm not having to run away from things or chasing things. That's the nature of addiction for me, was like the chasing, that kind of and there's parallels to meditation and addiction in terms of like touching that deepest part of craving without seeking out those old behaviors.
As I looked into that question of who am I, the second question came up is, who am I really? I'm a gay man. Who am I beyond that? I'm a gay man of color. Does that describe all of who I am? Not really.